Yeah. We want to go. Towards people. Towards students, please. So, can you pan real quick for me, Chris? So we have a lot of people in here today. Keep panning. Yeah, so we have a full room today. That works. So what we'll do is we'll go down the line and we'll introduce. So first off, we have right here, Miss Vara. So she is with Conde Naste. She's also an alum, by the way. It should come up, shouldn't it? Start doing it where it pops up to them. There you go. Yeah, sometimes the microphone will help if you put in the headphones. Then we have.
All right, is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Awesome. And then we have Miss Julie. She's an editor of politics at MTV News. And then we have. Can you hear us, Julie?
Oh, tell her to unmute.
Unmute.
Yeah, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Awesome. And then last but not least, we have Pablo. He is with Nick Animation Studios.
Hello.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll start out with Miss Vara. Vara, can you tell us a little bit about what it is you do and how you got to where you are right now with your career?
You want the Cliff Notes version? So I am a senior video producer at Conde Nast with Self Magazine. It's been quite a journey to get here, I'm not gonna lie. Took many, many years of working freelance, and I'm talking for free, building a portfolio and really kind of making those connections to get here. I don't know if that's like super short version.
Yeah, sure, definitely. And we can definitely hit on more like in-depth topics too. So yeah, feel as to give as much detail or as little as you like, and we can definitely fill in as we go. Cool.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much time because my story could easily be like 2 hours.
We went together like last week, so I got to hear all about her story. It was very, very interesting. Okay, Miss Julie, how about you? Can you tell us kind of a little bit what you do and how you kind of got to where you're at right now?
Yeah, so I'm a politics editor here at MTV News, which essentially we're actually going through a lot of editorial changes right now. So it's an interesting time to be telling you about what I do, but essentially we're trying to figure out, as much of media is, how to move more into video and how to talk about issues that matter to our audience, which is primarily young women ages 12 to 17, in a way that reaches them where they are, whether that's on Snapchat or Facebook or anywhere that they are. So yeah, just focusing on right now a lot of young activists. Yesterday I interviewed Marley Diaz, who created the campaign 1000 Black Girl Books, and we did a Q&A. So that's just kind of a sample of something that will be on the site from day to day. And yeah, I also have a very long story for how I got here. We can also get back into that later, but it really started when I was 16 and I started a feminist blog for young feminists. And that sort of took off and launched me into the world of media. And I had a few internships, including one at HuffPost Women. I was a staff writer at Mic.com, and actually I've had about 3 different jobs here at MTV News. So again, don't want to take up too much time, but I'm happy to go into any one of those experiences or all of them.
Nice, thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah.
Okay, Pablo, can you tell us a little bit about what you do and kind of how you got to where you're at?
Sure. I don't know if you can.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay. So I work at Nickelodeon. I'm an animation director for a group called Nick Digital. We kind of support all the shows in production at the studio. So I can help out Ninja Turtles or SpongeBob or whatever. But I do a lot of the animation or illustrations for what goes on here at the studio. I started off in animation. I fell in love with The Little Mermaid when I watched it my freshman year of high school, and I wrote a letter to Disney asking them what do I need to do to become an animator. They sent back a ton of information, and I followed it, did as much as I could of it, and went to Columbus College of Art and Design for traditional animation. The beginning of my senior year, Disney fired all of their traditional animators, so I ended up having to go through Animation Mentor, which is an online animation school for computer animation, and found out that I didn't love doing computer animation as much as drawing, so I chose to be in a place where I can do a little bit of both, but mostly drawing. So that's the short version.
Cool. So just a follow-up question, and we'll go through and do some follow-ups now. Pablo, can you tell us what is something that you put in your portfolio that you think kind of puts you over the top to get you into the industry you're currently in?
Well, I guess it depends. You have to kind of tailor your portfolio to the studio that you're applying for. So for Nickelodeon, I put in a lot more cartoony squash and stretch type of animation. Just show that a bunch of different types of animation or drawings to show like the diversity that I can do different styles of animation and things like that.
Cool, great, thank you so much. When we go back, Julie, can you kind of tell us a little bit about what was the first few things you did to really get involved in your industry? Because I know it's a super competitive industry. And what are the first couple of things you did or got yourself prepared for your portfolio to enter the industry?
Yeah, so I had a kind of untraditional path into media, and in some ways was lucky in that I mentioned I started a blog called The F-Bomb, which was for young feminists at 16. And I didn't do that with any intention of having that be a resume builder or to get into media. It was just, I was a young feminist nerd in Ohio and wanted to find other people online. And I got lucky and really invested in it and worked a lot, but it really took off. And a couple of years ago was consumed by the Women's Media Center, which is Gloria Steinem and Jane Fonda's organization. So I think really that experience of doing that, I was very lucky in that a lot of people in the industry began to notice that blog. And I've heard from a lot of people, so that's sort of like my exceptional thing that I did when I was younger, but it can be anything from like starting your own newsletter. And I know a lot of young people who are doing this now. I work with a lot of teens who want to go into media, and I always tell them, you know, just start your own project. It's never too late, just to show employers and anyone else that, you know, you have the ability to start something on your own and really have a beat that you can fill out. So for me, that was sort of the main thing that got me into the industry. And then I also went to Barnard College, which is in New York, and I had the opportunity to intern at HuffPost Women while I was still in college, which I think was really advantageous. And I'm a big advocate of interning while you're in college.
Cool. And can you tell us, since you started your own blog, we tell that to our students a lot of the times, if you want to be involved in journalism, online media, start your own blog. How did people you met in the industry or recruiters, did they react positively to that?
Yeah, so there was a lot of media coverage of the blog when I first started it. A lot of it was being in the right space at the right time. Because I was so young when I started it, it was sort of like a fun headline for other media companies to say, look at this teenager who started a feminist blog. But through that, really kept in touch with the people who had reached out to me. And that's another piece of advice that I give young people trying to get into media all the time is reach out to the people that even if they're not covering you for whatever reason, if you read a writer or like really know of a great editor at a news organization, even just reaching out to them through social media or sending them a quick email. Like if you're in the same city, asking to get coffee or even just like a quick informational phone call. I find media is a really competitive industry and can be really tough, but it's also full of great people who want to help other people and who are very willing to share their information and skills. And it's really, I think at the end of the day, those kinds of connections are really important.
Awesome, thank you so much. So Ms. Vara, since you came from UNC Charlotte, can you tell us maybe the first few things you did once you graduated to get into your industry? And I know you had a little hiccup, so if you want to talk about the little hiccup in between, that would be cool.
Yeah, sure. First thing I did once I graduated is I hightailed it to New York City. I didn't know anyone up here. So that made it a little challenging as far as networking. And I remember putting on my power suit, had my resumes, and I just went to all these different production companies. And they must have like laughed once I left because I ended up working at the Gap. So that was my sort of like kind of initiation into New York City. It's a very humbling experience. But you know, luckily you start to meet people along the way, and you know, people help you out and give you advice, and you take what you can from each individual as best you can. And you know, just having that resilience. You know, the economy crashed at some point, you know, you get laid off. I had to move back to Charlotte for a little bit, but it's all, you know, you take what you can out of all of it and try to see the silver linings. I worked a lot of odd jobs along the way. I even worked at like a portrait studio. I worked at Nintendo. I worked at Apple. Really great, credible companies, but they were never what I really wanted to do. Like, I knew I wanted to be a video producer. I knew I wanted to like put my message out there in video. So it took a while to get here. I'm not gonna lie, but it was ultimately those people and the people you network with and build those relationships with that helped me get here to where I am. I definitely did a lot of freelance work. I worked in men's fashion for a little while, and which was great. But you know, just kind of put together that portfolio. And then once I looked at my director's reel and I looked at it and said, you know, I would hire me. Then I knew I was ready to kind of go for the big guns at Conde Nast and say, okay, I'm ready. It did take a while though, and a lot of steps along the way.
So we actually had lunch together, and having lunch together, we got to talk a lot. And one thing I really liked that you brought up a lot was you really pushed. You never stopped pushing, which is what I really think is what I want a lot of students to always, you know, keep a hold of, right? If you push and you really want it, can you tell them maybe a few of the jobs you had to take in your industry to get to where you are, and maybe how some of that freelance work worked out for you as well?
Yeah, of course. You know, and I'm not gonna lie, there were definite times over the years where I never said to myself, okay, I'm gonna quit, I'm gonna give up. I always kept going, but there were times, you know, I was super discouraged or frustrated, or, you know, you just feel defeated. I'm not gonna lie, you know, you may or may not run into those moments, but you know, sometimes it's just not the right time. But you know, I definitely took what I could out of each job that I had. You know, being a portrait photographer for several years kind of helped me in the film industry. Like, I was able to get those frames, you know, like in compositionally right. Like, I didn't have to really think about it. Like, it was just happened. It became natural. Through Apple, just being a tech company the way it is, you know, like, so many talented people work at Apple. I'm not going to lie. And you get opportunities from that. You know, like, one of my coworkers there was like, hey, can you help me out with this shoot? And I always said yes to things. Like, I was always like, what can I get out of this? How can I become better at what I'm doing with this? So even if it was like waiting tables and working in retail, you know, you learn patience, you learn how to deal with going with the flow and composure. Like, you just try to, like, little things like that, you just try to pick up and grow as an individual.
Oh, thank you. Pablo, I have a question. Whenever you were starting out and you're kind of figuring out, you know, what it is exactly you wanted to do, can you tell me maybe some of the things you did right off the bat to start looking for jobs in your industry?
Yeah, so, well, at the time I graduated, everything was kind of imploding in the animation industry. So things, like I said, Disney was firing their traditional animators, and computer animation was starting up, and nobody kind of knew what was happening. I just kind of applied. I looked to all the companies that I wanted to work for, and decided that I would just send in my reel to those companies. My first job was in New York, working on a show called The Wonder Pets for Nick Jr. And I stayed there for 4 years, and then while I was there, I continued to learn and work and develop my animation skills, my talents, whatever, to continue to grow. It's like the industry is so is constantly changing and shifting. So if you have to be ready to constantly adapt and shift and change with it. So yeah, it was just finding where I wanted to be, or deciding where I wanted to be, finding the studios that gave me that option, and then doing what I could, making contacts, going out to conventions and conferences to meet and network with people. That really helped a lot. And just being, I think one of the things that helped me out was once I got a job, just being able to work well with others. Once that, you establish that relationship that you're a good worker, you're also hopefully nice and easy to work with. Once the job ended and all the people left, then you have people that you know all over in different studios that will also, call you over to help you, get jobs and stuff like that if that need ever arises.
Cool. So you mentioned having to learn about things that are changing in the industry. So I know we have quite a few animators. Is there anything right now that you guys are using? Specifically, like, is there a new type of program coming out that students who are interested in animation should know or know how to use?
Sure. So I know there's a bunch of different CG software packages, but Maya is usually the program that most studios use. I know there's some that use Studio Max or Softimage or whatever, but Maya seems to be the one that I've used in every job that I've had that was CG. As far as traditional animation, Toon Boom Harmony is a good program to know. It's like what most of the studios again are using that software package, and there are other programs coming out like Adobe Animate and stuff like that. I don't know how successful they will be, but Harmony seems to be the industry standard at the moment.
Oh, thank you. So back to Julie. Julie, can you kind of tell us, I think right now news is just consumed so much online. And it's like anyone can pretty much post any sort of blog, any sort of news story they really want, right? You can go out in your community and write. Can you maybe give some tips to students on how to make their writing stand out for political writing or just news writing in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the actual content, it might be hard, but if you really want to get into it, try to break news. I think it's actually been really interesting in this industry since I started. Even just a couple years ago, reporting wasn't necessarily devalued, but we were very much in this time where everyone was aggregating a lot of stuff, and like BuzzFeed sort of set the standard for clicking headlines. And I think at that point, in order to stand out, you had to get as many clicks as possible and be as appealing to as many readers as possible. And I think for better or for worse in this political climate, editors, especially all over New York and in the coastal cities, really are looking for people who are in the middle of the country and can bring them unique stories from their community. So actually, like, being at UNC is really advantageous right now. If there's something happening in your community that you don't see being covered by mainstream media, I would try to pitch it. You can, of course, publish it on your own blog and sort of send that link to editors that you think might be interested. But most people, most editors, most writers even at most publications will have their contact information publicly available. And I think you'd be surprised in just shooting them an email and pitching them a story and say, I've seen this going on. I want to go on the ground. Can I report it for you? Or again, just posting it yourself. But I think really taking advantage of the community you're in right now and the stories that you see happening around you could be really advantageous right now. And
could you also speak a little bit, because I know I've looked at your LinkedIn, I've seen your bio, it's really impressive. And if you want to share some of it with the students, that would be awesome too. Can you tell us maybe how some of those networking opportunities have helped you in your career?
Yeah, so as I said, I started with my blog, The F-Bomb, and from there I got the opportunity to write a book called A Little Left Up, Why Feminism is Not a Dirty Word. And then I ended up writing another book a couple years after that was a guide to freshman year of college for young women. And so that was all before I graduated college, and through those opportunities I was able to meet a lot of people in the publishing and media industries. And honestly, it's kind of difficult to say because I wish it weren't this way, but I mean, I've gotten every job I have had in this industry because I knew someone. And it's not even in the most obvious ways. And so like the biggest advice I would give is no matter what job you're in, try to get to know everyone you're working with, or even if you're in local media, getting to know people at other organizations around you. Because like, for example, at MTV right now, the job that I had was because I reached out to someone at HuffPost that I had interned with, but didn't really know while I was there, knowing that she had come to this company, and just like shot her a random email asking if she knew of opportunities, and there happened to be one that fit perfectly for me. And most people I know in media, it's a very networking driven industry. So yeah, and in terms of my resume, it really, the things that have built on each other, just sort of like getting the job at Mike was also because I had connected with a pretty high profile feminist who worked at Mike while I was still in college. And just, it was through Twitter. And I know so many people in the media industry who have made so many connections and even gotten jobs just by reaching out to someone on Twitter or another social media platform. So yeah, I think networking is a huge part of that.
Cool. Thank you. By the way, she's also made by Forbes for 30 under 30, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very impressive. Awesome, thanks for sharing. Miss Vara, so since you're in video production, can you kind of give us an idea of one of the maybe 2 or 3 skills that students really need to make sure they have nailed down before they really start going and looking for a position?
So a lot of production these days is kind of jack of all trades, just because with all the technology, there's less specialty work unless you're in big budget films. So you do need to know how to shoot, how to edit, how to even do just basic graphic work. I luckily know how to do like more animation as well, so that helps out a lot. Audio tweaking, pulling it together, you know, being organized. So it's just having all those kind of skill sets, you know, under your belt, so that way you can adapt to whatever you need to. My job, you know, it does encompass all of that. You know, I have to, you know, book the talent, book the hair and makeup, book the studio location, you know, shoot it, get the equipment, break it down, work with everyone, edit it, produce it, publish it. Like, you just have to kind of go with the flow. And I mean, no one's going to know everything. I certainly didn't when I even started my job here. You know, I kind of picked up a few things along the way, especially in regards to journalism as a whole and some of the terminology that they use. When they're like, you know, give us the head and deck, I was like, what? Like, oh, the headline, got it. You know, so because they do a lot of shortening of words, which is great. But, you know, that's just like a really tiny, small, easy example. But just know that learning never stops. Software is always changing. Just know that, you know, just have that self-driven ambition to be on top of it as best as you can. And it's okay to not know something. It's better to ask for help than have people assume that you know what you're doing, because then it could be a bigger mess in the end. So being transparent is the best advice I can give, and also being dependable. Like, I feel that there's so much talent out there, and sometimes it's hard to stand out, but just communicating is a huge part of it too. You know, people like working with people that actually follow up and don't flake out. I know some really super talented people out there that can't get work because they're just terrible at communicating. So just, I hope that helps.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question for all 3 of you. By raise of hands, have you ever worked with an intern before at your current location? You've worked with an intern, Vera? Pablo has. So Vera, can you tell us how maybe if they're going to intern somewhere, how they can stand out, or maybe what you really liked about the intern that you saw, or what you didn't like?
Well, at this location, the intern that we had kind of worked with all of us in a sense. I think it was just being available and contributing to the conversation and not feeling like you're, I don't know, disregarded. Like it's yeah, like interns matter too, and we appreciate the work that they provide.
Great. Pablo, you had your hand raised?
Yes. I would say just be, you know, in our studio, interns aren't allowed to touch production work. They can't touch anything that's going to go on air. So we have some interns who, when they get hired, they kind of complain a lot about that and don't participate or aren't into the environment of the studio as much. But the interns that will do as much as they can are the ones that kind of stand out, who will take the time to contact people within the studio. I've been contacted by interns that want to learn more about animation, and we'll sit down and speak with them, and they'll show me their work and stuff like that. And I guess the interns that really take the opportunity while they're in the studio to network and to get to know, I mean, I'm not saying like kiss everybody's butt, that's not what I'm saying. Just take the opportunity to like really get as much as you can out of the internship. Those are the ones that stand out. Great.
I have a question. Have you ever been slimed?
Have I ever been what?
Slimed, like the green slime Nickelodeon? Have you ever been slimed before?
I'm hearing flying. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
Like slimed, like the green slime.
Slime. Okay. No. Well, no, kind of. Not on purpose.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So what we'll do then is I want to kind of pick your brains. We'll go through everyone one more time, and then we'll open it up to questions from the students. Starting with Vera. Vera, is there any last bit of information or tips or anything that we really didn't cover that you really wanted to tell the students?
I think it's hard once you leave college. I'm not going to lie. You go out there and you have this newfound freedom and hope, and it depends on where you go, what you're doing, and some people have an easier ride than others. You know, it's okay to ask for help. I think that's the best advice I can give. Sometimes our pride can eat at us, and once you kind of become that vulnerable person and say it's okay that I need help, then things start to suddenly happen for you in a good way, and it's okay. Sometimes you can't do it all by yourself.
Cool, thank you. Julie?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to sort of echo that message of asking for help, I think just reaching out. Like, I remember when I was in college, networking seemed like such a formal term, and I didn't really understand what that meant until I figured out it's just reaching out to people who you admire and who you want to know and who you want to learn from, and just asking them for some of their time or their guidance, or even just making that connection so they know who you are and that you're up and coming in the industry. As I said, that's pretty much how I've gotten every single one of my jobs, and at least I think in creative fields in general, and especially in media, people tend to want to go with people they know and who they can vouch for, just because so much of the work is, you know, creative and subjective, rather than sort of objective in terms of your scores or whatever. So yeah, ask for help. Just try to reach out to as many people as possible in that industry and get to know everyone you can.
Great, thank you. Pablo?
Yeah, I would say that one of the things that is more important for my industry, I guess, maybe for the others as well, is to have, I guess, kind of a thicker skin when it comes, like, for our art, we have to be able to take notes and feedback. We're working working with another person's vision. You know, you get hired to work on someone else's idea. And so if we turn something in and we get notes, feedback on it, it's just really important to be able to not take it personally, that it doesn't meet the director's vision, or if you think your work is better than the director, then you just have to learn to keep it to yourself and just be able to take feedback without getting too angry, I guess.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so now it's your turn. So just so everybody knows, before we do questions, we'll take a few questions as much as possible. If you probably don't need to ask questions about their internships, we can help you out with that, me and Suzanne, your career advisors. So maybe ask more things about like their story or advice. But if it's about internship questions specifically, just make an appointment with one of us and we can help you out. Sound cool? Sweet. Okay. First question. You are itching. Yeah.
I have a question for Pablo. So when you emailed Disney, what was the advice that they told you to get started with this?
Could you repeat that a little louder? Sorry.
He said that whenever you emailed Disney, what advice did they give you to get started in the industry?
Oh, okay. Well, back then email wasn't around, but I got a letter back that they said, so it's like an entertainment industry, right? So they asked me to watch as much television as possible, watch as many movies as I can, take acting classes. They told me don't draw cartoons, to learn human anatomy, human and animal anatomy. Once I'm able to draw realistically, then from there I can branch out to the different styles of cartooning. And yeah, those are the main, and then just kind of draw all the time. And again, that was back when it was traditional animation was the big thing. So now it would just be still acting, still drawing, but I guess nailing down the human emotion more than the anatomy.
Thank you. Thank you. Other question? Yeah, right here.
I have a question for Pablo.
Pablo?
Okay, so in your portfolio, did you do animation at all when you turned it into Nickelodeon as a part of your portfolio?
Yeah, we. So now everything is done online. So I had to get a reel together with a bunch of different animation clips that I've done. I didn't really submit any drawings anymore, any like portfolio layout. It was just a show reel that had all the different animations on it. And again, just a quick note: if you are putting together a reel, only put your best stuff on there. Don't if you think, you know, get feedback and advice from others. But if you think if you have a question about it, don't put it on your reel. Just take it off, keep it off. Only show your best work, and don't steal other people's work.
Good feedback. Another question? Down here on the end.
I got a question for Julie. So I'm actually more a marketing. I'm more a marketing major, but I actually really like to write, and I wanted to get into journalism. And I know that your expertise is in political journalism, but with other brands, kind of like more arts and entertainment, is there anything that I could potentially do to establish myself as a good writer while also not necessarily writing about something that's hard news like politics or world events?
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of touching on this a little bit before, but I think a lot of new writers don't realize how relatively easy it is to pitch an editor. I would say just identify the kind of magazine or kind of outlet that interests you, and try to find out who the editor of the section that you would want to pitch to at that magazine or outlet is, and just shoot them an email. Even if it's a specific pitch, if there's something on your mind, like definitely send them that. And as specific as possible is always great, and especially if you have a unique perspective to bring to it that you think you haven't seen elsewhere, that's always great to include. But even just reaching out to editors at places you admire and asking if they're looking for anything in particular, or or giving them your resume and saying, this is the specific perspective I have, I would love to write for you. But then also, as we were saying before, it's very easy to start your own blog or put something on Medium, and that might be a great first step if you're just sort of like getting your toes wet and just sort of want to see for yourself what kind of things interest you, and sort of soliciting feedback from other people, other writers that you know, maybe professors or other students.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Next question? Yeah, right here.
I have like one simple question and like another like more specific. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay. I have a question for all of you guys, and so I know Julie said about reaching out, and this may be a little bit bold of me to ask, but is there any way that we could have your contact information to, I guess, network and ask more specific questions besides just at this panel? And if not, that's okay. And then I want to be a singer, so I was wondering, besides starting a YouTube channel and posting videos of my singing and stuff, what would you suggest, I guess, to help expand that? I think specifically that question would be towards Julie. She started doing this blog.
And I'll answer the email question. No. But you can always maybe try to connect through LinkedIn, right? So if you don't have a LinkedIn, it's a great time to get together. But LinkedIn is probably the better way to go about doing that too, because then they can also maybe help connect you if possible and answer questions. So, and then who was your question for about this?
Julie.
Julie.
Yeah. So actually, my advice is sort of not really based on what I do, since I haven't really worked on the entertainment side of media, but randomly I have a friend I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, who is now on an NBC show, and he started also by putting his music, he's primarily a musician, on YouTube, as it sounds like that's sort of like the standard first step for an artist now. But how he actually like really built his platform was by being really active on social media. I remember when he had like less than 1,000 followers on Twitter, and now he has hundreds of thousands. And so much of that was just by cultivating a fan base on there and being really, when like the few fans who did find him through YouTube, like developing relationships with them and showing them that he was a real person and wanted to connect with them. And I think it's so much easier said than done. It's a really hard thing, but like, just I know through media, as I was saying, networking, just following people on Twitter also, and maybe looking up to musicians who have made it past that way. I'm sure some would be happy to talk with you. And just making as many connections as you can is always a great first step.
Thank you. Nice networking chops though, Nia. I like it. Yeah, right here.
My question is for Vara. I wanted to ask about your freelance work. What is the biggest freelance job you've landed, and what is just some advice you could give about freelance?
So the freelance world is a vast pool. Some of the bigger stuff I worked on ended up being Vogue for Taiwan. I did MPG, which is like an athletic brand. I'm trying to think of the bigger stuff. I did a lot of New York Fashion Week, and just a lot of these like sort of up and coming magazines that, you know, wanted to kind of showcase some of their like their work in video platform. And you end up getting to know the hair and makeup artists and the editor-in-chiefs of these magazines and the models and just everyone involved, the photographers. And then they're like, oh, hey, there's this other gig. You want to help me out with that? You know, you just start to kind of say yes to things, you know, per your availability. And as long as it's what you want to do. It just kind of became its own beast at some point. But I definitely got something out of all of it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
Well, how do you go about reaching out to some of the bigger names?
So a lot of those ended up happening because of people pulling me in. Unfortunately, on the video side of things, especially in fashion, we're kind of an afterthought sometimes. So a lot of stuff was already sort of built up, like the photographer and the magazine already put everything together, and they're like, oh, let's do a video. So then they hire me as an afterthought. And a lot of the bigger stuff happened in that respect. The photographer knew me and pulled me in at the end, towards the end. So it was just networking again.
Thank you. Next question, right back there in the back.
I have a question for Julie.
There you go.
Okay. I just want to know, like, when did you know that your stuff was good enough to send to the editors, the pitches? You know, because I know you send anything, but like, how do you know, like, this is worth it? You know?
Yeah. So I mean, and this is a big part of writing in media in general. So I mean, first of all, I wrote for years and years, and this is sort of like the main piece of advice is to be really open to editing. I think as an editor, I've worked with a lot of, especially young or first time or new writers who just like they get very precious about their work. And especially when it's a personal subject or something more serious, it totally makes sense. But I think it's not even so much about knowing you're ready. If you're putting in the work, it's about being open to that editing process and to taking feedback. And I mean, I think, but in terms of knowing you're ready, before you pitch something, you're in an academic environment. If they're like peer tutors or other people in your program or professors who will read a draft, to take advantage of that stuff. And I think there's sort of a myth about media and journalists that we just sort of like, you get the job and you're already so talented and everything is perfect. Like even professional journalists are edited multiple times. So just be open to that experience and really try to get as many people as possible to look at your work before you submit it, and then recognize when you do put it out there, it will still probably need to be edited, and just being open to that.
Thank you. Next question, down here on the end.
This one is for Pablo, and for like the portfolio, if you're not like wanting to apply as an editor, but like just trying to apply for a storyboard artist or a painting artist, should you put like portfolio for it?
The last part cut out there. When you said when applying for a storyboard artist position, you want to know what you put in for a portfolio for that? Yeah. I am just gonna guess that you have a bunch of storyboard samples. I don't know. I can ask around if you'd like, but I think just being something that demonstrates that you have a grasp of the cinematic language, that they'll be able to see a bunch of different types of cinematic motion or something like that. So something that is a little more dramatic, something that has lighting, the scale and stuff of the people in the set and things like that, just to see if you can follow it clearly. That is just my best guess though.
Next question? Okay.
So my question is for Julie. So being in the media career field, would you say that in terms of getting a job, would you say that your social media, like, would you say having like social media, would you say like we should put it private or public? Like, do they look at that social media and like where they do like, what's the balance of professional and like not boring, like, you know? Like.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, because I think especially younger people now are told like make everything private and don't share anything, but like actually the reality of media is, at least for Twitter, it's a huge platform for both networking, making connections, and also I don't know if it's a rule across the board, but I think a lot of employers do look at sort of what you're tweeting in terms of, especially if you're applying for a news position, are you up on the news? Like, what are you aware of and what are you engaging in that space? So Twitter for sure I would make public. And I've actually seen, like, over the past few years, I think that it's a really good question about how much to put yourself into that profile. I think people were still trying to figure that out. I see people, like, some of the biggest media profiles and personalities are as big as they are because they engage with people and because they're not afraid to put themselves into that social media space, of course, in like a professional, appropriate way. But I think there's no problem in trying to be yourself and showing people that you have a personality too, and sort of tailoring your interests to what you're posting as well to show who you are and what you could bring to a particular place. As for like Instagram and Facebook, other platforms probably don't matter as much, but really Twitter is like where most media networking and things happen.
Thank you. Question in the middle back.
I was gonna say how often should one be networking?
One question is, how often should someone be networking? Who would like to take it? Anyone can take it.
Sure, I would just say just constantly. You know, when I freelanced for 2 years before getting a job here at Nickelodeon, and I've been fortunate that my job has lasted because I'm not part of like one production. But if something was to happen, it would be kind of a late start to start networking once I needed it. Like I think you should always just be constantly networking, constantly reaching out. I think it was said before by Jess Rivera that just get an online presence as soon as possible and get your stuff out there just so people can see it and see who you are, get to know your work, and just don't ever stop networking.
Thank you. Sarah, Julie, do you have anything you want to add on to that?
I can go. Yeah, I'm just exactly what he's saying. Never stop networking. You never know who's going to end up where, and if you keep those good relationships, sometimes they'll surprise you.
Cool. Thank you. Another question. Let me get someone real quick who hasn't asked. I'm sorry. Right back here in the middle. Yeah.
My question's for Jess.
For Jess. Or, yeah. Go for it.
So I was wondering, it seems like you've hit a few hiccups on the road, as you said, and you've worked for a variety of companies and had a variety of positions. So I was just wondering how long it took you to get to the position that you're happy with now. I think that's what I'm more concerned with, is how long it's going to take me to get where I want to be.
Well, everyone's going to walk a different path for sure. After the economy hit, and I had a pretty cool job at an ad agency a while ago, and once the economy hit, they laid off everyone. You know, we're all devastated, and I felt like I was blacklisted. I honestly did, because everywhere I tried to get into was like, no, 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 and I wasn't getting anything. So, you kind of have to take jobs as they are and go into survival mode. So, there's a lot of circumstances that are going to be in the way. For me, it took a long time, like several years, to get to where I am, but it could have happened sooner if maybe I, had a different path. I don't know. So not everyone's going to take as long as I did, or maybe some people take out longer. You never know. I don't want to say, yeah, it's going to take 10 years. It could happen next year for you. It could happen immediately. It could happen 20 years. It's hard to predict. But the best advice I can give, just like we've all been saying, is just kind of keep those network opportunities open. Like even here, I had the weirdest network opportunity got me here. From Apple, again, a lot of talented people work there. One of the guys that was a genius had left a couple years prior, and I just ran into him one day. We had one of those little catch-up conversations, and he's like, yeah, I'm a software engineer at Conde Naste. I was like, whoa, hold the phone. You work where? And knowing that was a company that I've always wanted to work for, I was like, so you do referrals? And he's like, yeah, sure. What, give me information. And I had never hung out with this guy, never communicated with him. I didn't even have his phone number. It was just we just had a good work relationship while he was there, and he was willing to trust in that. And I was eternally grateful. And he reminded me, he's like, I will make sure someone sees your resume, but it's all you from there. So it just happened to be the right time.
Thank you.
And then your question, what was it?
For Pablo.
Pablo? Yeah, sure.
So, which type of animation work at Nickelodeon?
I do both. I do all the different kinds because I help out all the different productions. So I can work on I worked on Avatar: Legend of Korra, which is hand-drawn and CG, or SpongeBob, which is 2D, or Ninja Turtles, which is all CG. Yeah, I think being diverse definitely helps. So.
Other question? What about you?
How would one get into voice acting? What would you know?
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, sure. He asked, how would one get involved in voice acting in Nickelodeon?
In voice acting? I'm not sure. I know that there are, I think I'm guessing most actors have agents who help them get that, but I'm not completely sure.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, most voice actors would have like an agent or something. They usually go out to voice production talent to get that talent. But if you want to meet, we can talk about it. Other questions? Right back here in the middle.
This is mostly for all of you guys, but I'm really interested in like Japan and having international sort of relations. So how does that come into work at your workplaces?
Who'd like to take it? All three if you can. Yeah?
I can go first. So it's going to depend on the company you work for. Like I know Conde Nast is international, so there's the opportunity if we need that. I'm sure it's a possibility, but as far as a little interesting fun fact, speaking about Japan specifically, because I almost moved there several years ago, military bases do offer careers to civilians. So if you see any jobs there that they'll pay for you to go out there and work for them. So little fun fact. And then there's also like language learning programs and stuff. So when you're actually there, you could probably build that sort of network web in that location.
Julie or Pablo, did you have anything to add?
Sure. Nickelodeon is more kind of like a brand name where we have work that's done by a bunch of different studios in Canada, Korea, China, India. So it's like this. These are completely separate studios that do that work, but then the show is sold under the Nickelodeon brand. So if you wanted to go into animation, there's most of the animation jobs are outsourced nowadays, unfortunately. But if you wanted to travel, there's a lot more animation opportunities in Canada, Korea, Japan, I'm sure, than there are here in the United States.
Thank you. So I believe that is all the time we have right now. So what I'll actually do too is I'll get with Vara, Pablo, and Julie, because I looked them up and I found their reels and their websites and all that fun stuff, which I think has a lot of great information. I'll double check with them. That's all right. I share that with you guys after this. But let's give them three a round of applause. They're super busy and they took time to do this during their lunch break, so we really appreciate it. And thank you all so much. Bye, Vara. Bye, Julie. Bye, Pablo.
but I'm in